Hi, everyone. We're going to give everybody a few minutes. We went a little bit over on our last talk, and then we'll be getting started here with Matt Praviti, as he's going to be talking about stringing and his expertise in that category and how you can make some money customizing and taking care of your students' stringing opportunities. So we're starting to gather some participants and hopefully gave everybody a chance to have a drink of water and get back at it here. So Matt is our second to last speaker today. We've got one more that will happen at 12 o'clock on mental tennis. So I wanted to introduce Matt. He's going to tell you a little bit more about himself. And Matt is at a club, the Balboa Tennis Club in San Diego, and he has had the opportunity to be pretty much a annual stringer for the Kalamazoo Nationals, and also has strung Rafa Nadal's rackets, and he's been a part of really kind of taking the racket customization and taking care of your students to another level. So we're really glad to have you, Matt, and I'll let you take it from here, sir.
Thanks for having me,
speaking.
Greg.
Yep.
This is a topic that I am thrilled to speak about because it's probably the subject that has advanced my career the most, and maybe I would argue the furthest. I grew up in Connecticut. My father's a coach. My mother has run tennis clubs our whole life, and I was kind of groomed, if you will, not in a bad way, but in a good way, to be a tennis pro, tennis life, tennis family. And about 13 years ago, when I moved to San Diego, I looked around and realized that what I thought was exceptional for the state of Connecticut and kind of that country club life was just another tennis pro in the very competitive marketplace of San Diego. And I decided that I needed to have something that separated me from the pack. I had a number of colleagues that were fitness experts, that were all about injury prevention, that had played on the tour, that were high-level coaches, that could be your hitting partner, that had resumes that were miles long, had played in majors, all sorts of really impressive skill sets. And I realized one day when I was hitting with some high schoolers that the high schoolers themselves might actually be better tennis players than I am. I was depressed. I thought, what am I going to do out here? And that was when my tennis equipment journey began. And I really found my passion for making a name for myself as far as stringing and customization, injury prevention, and just being a beacon of information and advice for tennis players. And that's carried me from, again, more country club jobs and coaching at tennis facilities that I'm sure many of us do or are looking to do, all the way to working with pros on the tour, giving advice to players who have won majors. And as you'll hear today, it's not that far of a journey to the top in the stringing and customization realm. So I want to share some advice and information with you guys about how and why you need to be the beacon of information for your students when it comes to stringing, strings, tension, rackets. Maybe even we'll dive into customization a little bit. I titled my talk today about being a complete coach, and it all stems from a discussion I had recently with someone I would consider a mentor of mine, and I'll leave this person nameless, but they're very well-known high-performance coach and well-respected in the industry, and I've always tried to soak up whatever information they have. And just in jest, they gave a comment when I was giving a similar talk recently with this person. And they said, God, you just, every time I talk to you, I learn something new. And I remember being shocked that this person who I have kind of held on a pedestal would say something like that I'm significantly younger. I have much less experience. I don't have the playing career. I haven't, done many of the things they have, and that they were even just lightly informing me that every time we spoke, they learned something new about equipment and stringing. And it reminded me that if you're striving to be a complete package as a tennis coach, you must have this knowledge. And even a baseline of knowledge is better than someone who, and I hear this a lot from other coaches, I don't do that. Go talk to Matt. I don't know how to do that. I don't know the first thing about it. And I think that's contrary to what I learned when I became a USPTA pro, which is we're always learning, we're always growing. So I want to talk to you about becoming that complete coach, why you need to complete your education and your interest in strings, stringing, rackets, customization, equipment, and maybe to put it simply, why you need to become the tour guide, the Sherpa, if you will, for your students, informing them, helping them, answering questions, and just kind of sifting through all the noise that's out there on the internet. So when I think about what is a complete coach, what's somebody who has every skill set, what comes to mind is someone who can coach and has answers and has insight and information about all different facets of our sport for people of all different levels. I know some very impressive professional tennis coaches that coach pro players that can't teach a beginner to save their life. I know people who are world-class colored ball enthusiasts, and their juniors can pick up tennis in a simple way in a day, that if I put them on the court with high performance juniors, they might not see grip changes or weight transfers and kinetic chain and stuff like that. So what I'm here to talk about is how, whatever your specialty is, there are ways you can enhance your players' learning. There are ways you can diminish things that they struggle with, maybe even injuries or fatigue. And how, at the very least, you need to be, again, that person guiding your players. And as a complete coach, I think there's some benefits that go beyond just your students having more knowledge or being impressive. One of them is for your club, your facility. Every club I've worked at, and I'll say that lightly, I don't want to sound like it's been desperation from every club I've worked at, but every club I've worked at for the most part has said, oh, thank God you string rackets. We can't find the guy who strings our rackets isn't answering the phone. Or, oh, that's so cool that you have all that pro shop knowledge, because the people we pay minimum wage to sit behind the desk really don't know what they're doing. So there's a need for this at almost every club. And I think what that does, not just for the club, but for you as a coach, is it brings more skills to the table that you don't have to claw for positioning. If I showed up to most Southern California tennis clubs and said, I'm the high performance junior expert, I would imagine that most of them would say, well, you have to get in line behind our current high performance junior expert. And a lot of clubs are lacking that and are wanting that. And I would even argue have kind of calloused themselves to the fact that they need that. No, we don't string here. I'll say, you don't string here. This is a tennis club business. You don't string their rackets. You send it elsewhere. Oh, well, we don't really do rackets. We don't sell. We don't, I don't know. My point is, when you bring that stuff to the table, facilities want you. They value you more. They can't get rid of you. They really need your skill set. I think there's a couple other reasons why having this information and skill set is critical. And that's because as the seasons change, so do students. So in the summertime, we know that there might be vast summer camps at your facility filled with children. And what happens, or kids, I should say, what happens as soon as fall comes around? They go back to school. The high schoolers go off and play high school tennis, at least the girls do in the fall and the boys do in the spring out here. You can't just wait around for summer to come again and have your career explode. There has to be other ways of earning revenue than just focusing on one set of students. I want to talk about where you go in the country. If you're from Southern California and you're used to coaching the top juniors in the country, and you move to North Dakota, no offense to any pros from North Dakota, the level of students changes. Well, maybe if you're the high performance expert, North Dakota isn't going to be a facility that works out for you. Every facility needs someone who can string. Every facility, every location of tennis players needs someone that is an expert and can help their clients to maneuver that sort of quagmire of questions and not really great answers. And I'm trying this and I'm experimenting, and the internet said that. The other big reason why I think this is so critical for me, I would say great music is when all the instruments that are different are kind of utilizing and playing off of each other, different themes and different feelings. The same thing goes at a tennis club. So I run all the adult programs at Balboa Tennis Club. I daily have my demos out there with me, not just so people can try the rackets, but I have them strung certain ways so that players can try a different material string, a different tension range. And as soon as that experiment happens where I'm getting somebody to try something different, they go, well, great, where do I get this? And I say, you can just walk right over there into the pro shop, and I'll make sure I go in there with you and tell you exactly what you need and tell them what you need. And that bolsters my coaching business. That bolsters the pro shop, which then again reinforces my career at the facility I'm at. It makes money for the facility. I don't think I need to tell everyone why that's so important, but it creates this dynamic where you are invaluable because this is something that's necessary and is often overlooked. So I want to dive in a little bit deeper here and talk about why this is so critical and why you need to start getting involved in asking all of these questions that can be a bit complex in terms of being an actual coach. And these are things I don't hear discussed enough. One of them is, if you are, let's just take, again, I don't want to only talk about high performance juniors, but that tends to be the clearest example to me. Let's say you pride yourself on coaching high performance junior players. I'm sure you have spent hours and hours and hours, if not years, on the court with your player, building a rapport, learning about their likes and dislikes, their positive thinking, their negative thinking, their mindset, their movement, their mobility, their how they handle adversity, how they train when they're on fire and they're playing great, how they deal with tough losses and tough things in their life. You know them inside and out. And then they say, what strings should I get? And they say, I use the black ones. So you can see where I'm going with this, that controlling every aspect, or at least guiding your student on every aspect of their performance, for some reason often ends at the equipment, right? I'll have a coach, this happened recently. A player said, I love the Pure Drive. I've been playing with the Pure Drive for years. They wanted to switch from Babolat to Wilson. I asked them what happened next, and they said the Wilson rep said I should get the blade. It's a very different racket, plays differently. We didn't even discuss, they didn't mention what kind of string they'd have to be using, what gauge, what they were going to send them. They were just a passenger floating along in what is a critical decision. And I'm not saying they made the wrong decision. I'm saying the coach wasn't even a part of that. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's a missed opportunity. And I think if that change goes wrong, if the player's now playing a different style, if God, there's so many different ways that can go horribly. If their shoulder starts bothering them, the coach usually goes, I don't know, maybe we take time off, go to a doctor, maybe they'll know. And again, I think that if you're a complete coach, you at least are in that discussion in every aspect with your players. I do think I brought up a point I want to hammer home, which is injury prevention. I speak to so many players that say, oh yeah, I string my strings at 58 pounds. And we can get into why that's a mistake later, but I string it at 58 pounds for lots of control. That's what the person at the tennis shop said. And then they need to take time off because their shoulder's sore. And a really simple discussion with your players is, if you had to choose between playing the best tennis of your life, but you're in agony every time you hit the ball, or I'm not really playing that great, but I'm 100% injury free, which would you choose? And whenever I pose that to people, I'd say 9 times out of 10, they make the right choice, which is, yeah, I could work on getting better. I could work on playing better, but taking time off and getting surgery and taking medication is not, it's not the best option. the best option is health first, and then we get better later. And the coaches need to be the ones sort of instigating and really hammering home that point. I think the other thing I want to say, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but I think it's an important point to make, is I like to look at other tennis coaches, because San Diego landscape is very dense as far as great coaches, great facilities, opportunities, and options for your players to play. I need to do something to separate myself from the other options. So I try to look at my other pros in San Diego as colleagues, not competitors. So I'm not in any way saying you should be beating them and competing with them, but I want to look as good as possible to all of the students out there. And I cannot begin to tell you, in these last 13 years I've been in San Diego, how many people connect with me and go, hi, my friend said you're the person to talk to about why my tennis elbow won't go away. Or pro players that I deal with. I run a business where I customize rackets for junior, college, and pro tennis players. And it's 100% word of mouth. That I've had NCAA champions that call me and go, hey, my teammate told me you really helped him hit a bigger serve. How do I get that? Or, I played in college and I remember you consulted with my coach about which string I should be using. And now I'm on the pro tour and I really need your advice. It's allowed me to touch a part of the tennis industry that I, quite frankly, might never touch as a coach and might never touch, certainly not as a player. But when I can have players that are like, yeah, I'm leaving for Wimbledon next week and I really need you to straighten me out and get my head right on what we're doing as far as string. Humbly, I'm blown away every time I get a chance to do that. And that was 13 years ago that I dove into this. I want to keep moving here. How can equipment knowledge make you a better coach? So one of the aspects that I think is overlooked in coaching is, can I change or make changes to your equipment that will enhance or, again, diminish different things we're looking for, and maybe do it indirectly? There's a concept that I love that they talk about in education, and I think sometimes I've heard this discussed in like colored ball coaching, called indirect learning. So when I was a little kid, my dad used to take me into the living room and blow up a balloon, and we would play a game where we would try to bop the balloon up in the air without letting it hit the ground. What was he really teaching me? Hand-eye coordination at a slow enough pace so a little kid could get the basics of tennis before he could even really run or hold a tennis racket. I didn't know that that's what I was learning, but that's what I was learning. You can do that with your equipment for your players. So for instance, a small, simple example, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's conceptual. If you take, let's say, a 9, 10, 11-year-old who's learning how to hit topspin, and maybe green dot or intro to the yellow ball, you could probably do this with orange ball as well. And you strung their racket super loose, and the strings were putting so much energy on the ball that the balls were going out. Strength is at a premium for young children. And so if you make it easy enough for them to hit too far, what is the logical option they're going to have to think about the day that you start to teach them that topspin makes the ball land shorter? Now it's not physically difficult for them to get the ball sent over the net. So now they have a lot more strength, and I would argue control of their body to flick a little topspin and keep it in. And you are enforcing that sense of, if I swing fast and lean the strings forward and come over the ball will have plenty of arc and go over. All you're doing is leading them to that conclusion. Now imagine this scenario. You play yellow ball from the baseline. Your player gets a very light racket and it's strung at 65 pounds. This is, again, the same 11-year-old. They're going to have to do everything they can just to get the ball over the net. And they don't want to add topspin to it because it's going to make it come short and they don't have enough excess strength. What situation does that create? Moonballers at that level. That you have 26-inch rackets that come pre-strung, and I would argue fairly tight for a junior, creates the moonballer dynamic. When you have a child take their parents' racket strung at their parents' tension, their first 27-inch racket, this happens all the time, and they're struggling, they go, oh God, they've lost all their technique because the equipment is prohibiting that. So that's something I could talk about for hours, and it's very conceptual and abstract, but I want you guys to start thinking about what would be the result if I altered something in my players' rackets. Again, I would use the same example for adults, especially adults that didn't play throwing sports as a kid, learning a spin serve. If you string the strings too tight for control, I hope you smell my sarcasm there, a beginner adult might not have enough strength to swing fast and put spin on it and get it to go in the box. But stringing the racket looser and maybe with polyester, and we'll get into that discussion, might give them enough strength where just flicking a little spin on it is effortless. And now they can hit a spin serve, and you've just saved them years of development and just practice, lessons, money, time. I think when it comes to coaching, again, in terms of a coach who understands equipment, I am always pleasantly surprised when I speak to a player. And I always, when I'm customizing for a player, always try to talk to their coach to at least get their insight into what they're working on. I am always surprised at all levels, junior, adult, coach, when their coach has an understanding of equipment, and it gives me a greater respect for them. And I think the same thing happens with students. Students will say, yeah, this person really knows everything I'm trying to do. It gives you more clout. It gives you more respect in the industry having this in your toolbox. I want to talk about what happens when your students make choices for themselves as far as their equipment, or maybe with the stringer. Maybe they go to a pro shop that's not associated with your club. Maybe they go to the pro shop at your club and you just have no engagement with the pro shop. And maybe their stringer themselves, the internet, their parents, are making choices about their equipment and string, maybe based on finances, saving money, based on what's popular, right? Student says, I want to use what Rafa uses. And that directly goes against what you're trying to do. These may be innocent, harmful interactions that are made with the best of intentions. But if you're trying to teach someone, again, let's say an adult, to hit a spin serve, and they're given a racket that is crazy heavy and strung super tight with a multi-filament, that's not something that enhances your spin serve. And most of us know that. So I need to be involved in my students' discussion of their equipment so that I can, again, guide them and avoid pitfalls and avoid issues. I want to talk about briefly the sort of Bermuda Triangle of tennis equipment and what that means. So there's this triangle of just irresponsibility, ignorance, if you will. One piece of the triangle is the student. Most students, especially when we're talking about juniors and their parents, but most students in general really don't have a ton of equipment knowledge, and that's understandable why. There's an ocean of information, most of which is baloney and outdated, and it's hard to tell the wheat from the chaff. And students are Googling things. They're looking at Tennis Warehouse, the worst place you could send them. You know, I always ask my students, hey, I'm open to Tennis Warehouse's opinion. When was the last time you saw a negative review on Tennis Warehouse? Don't use this. We don't like this. You won't see it. And the reason is because they're in the business of sales, and that's okay, but we need to acknowledge that they're not the best place for your advice when one player goes, oh, this is great on volleys. That has no meaning to any of my students because you're not that player. So that's one piece, is the student is not the best person at answering these questions. And they turn to, I would argue rightly so, their coach for answers. That's the second piece of the triangle. And the two responses I hear most often with coaches are, you should use what Djokovic uses, right? Well, the speed is what Djokovic uses. Gut and polyester is what Djokovic uses. They'll reference what pros use. And the other one is they'll reference what they use. And I don't think it gets stated enough that most adult tennis coaches in very few ways relate to their students, especially if they're juniors, especially if they're high performance juniors, and the adult coach learned to play 30 years ago in a very different game than a high performance junior. For numerous reasons, I'm sure everyone here can understand why most coaches go, that's not me. I don't know. Keep it to yourself. Go talk to the stringer. Maybe they'll know. They're just kind of passing the buck. And hopefully after today, that changes a little bit. The third piece of the puzzle is the stringer, the stringing shop, the retailer, the tennis warehouse, whatever you want to call it, the pro shop. And I think it's important to recognize again that pro shops are in the business of sales. So I've seen 75-year-old women that are 3.0, 3.5 level, that are very common at a tennis club, go into a pro shop and say, I hit with a lot of topspin. Give me a racket for lots of topspin, and come out with the Federer Pro Staff that weighs 11.5 ounces. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying the player is just self-judging themselves, and the stringer who's never seen them hit is kind of just going on what they're told. They're just kind of estimating. So I don't blame shops when they go, yeah, this sounds like what you're asking for. Again, what is the shop doing? They're passing the buck right back to the student. And I think an important concept for, how do I say this? I think here's the way I would describe it. Pro shops are great pharmacists. So a pro shop is oftentimes wonderful at saying, you need this medication coming right up. You need 35 pounds at this type of string. I can give you that. You need 56 pounds at this. You want a pure drive with a bigger grip. You want to change the balance. You want to change the weight. I can do whatever prescription you need, but I need to know from someone what that prescription is. And who should that be? That should be you, the doctor, who's seen all the test results, who has been in the trenches and seen that when the player says they like to hit a lot of topspin, that's not really what's going on. That's not really their style of play. Or when a junior says, oh man, I'm hitting the cover off the ball, and they go, you know what, we still could get more out of that. So here's what I would recommend. My particular skill set, and again, what I'm going to recommend all of you try to become, is the doctor and the pharmacist. So I can be on court and discuss and even analyze, that's the dynamic. What's causing this issue? Why can't we learn this? Or why is this happening a lot? Can I alter your equipment? Again, here's maybe a demo to try, or let me hand you my racket strung differently. Try this, adjust this. And then I walk them into the pro shop and I take the racket and I string it. That's where I make my, I don't want to say make my money as if that's my only paycheck, but that's the real kicker, because none of the pro shop people are doing that. We have a wonderful standalone pro shop down here in Southern San Diego that competes with my club. And I don't have to sell people on why they shouldn't go there. When I say, whoa, listen, why are you doing, why is that strung like that? Why are you having a racket strung with Kevlar? No one has used Kevlar in 20 years. There are almost no benefits to it at all nowadays. And they say, I don't know. I told them I break a lot of strings, which by the way, they break strings once every 3 months. That's not that much. And you know, what are we doing here? And then they go, oh God, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I went in there and had no idea. They've never seen me play. You all see where I'm going with this. This is a missed opportunity. People who say, I don't string, coaches, I should say, who say, I don't do that, or I don't really jump into that. You are doing a disservice to your players, to the tennis industry, to your club. And hopefully you're getting a little excited about how this is going so far, because I know I'm excited talking about it. I want to talk about your career, why this can be critical to have this skill set in your quiver. Again, you separate yourselves from other candidates. I don't need to say that the reason I'm here on this dais with these wonderful, exceptional speakers speaking to all these different USPTA sections is because this is what I specialize in. This is a huge part of, actually, I shouldn't say that. I also specialize in coaching adult tennis players. I'm not talking about that today, am I? Because there are many different people who are experts at that. I love getting in groups and discussing that and teasing ideas and throwing out concepts. And oh, I picked something up from them. I picked something up from them. I don't know many coaches that can ever have this discussion with me or ever want to have this discussion with me. So I'm thrilled to get to talk about this today for that reason. There are other career opportunities that can supplement your income. So most people that know me know that I work for the best string company in the world, Solinco, and now I would argue one of the best racket manufacturers in the world. That's a relationship that started, gosh, maybe 8 years ago. I was stringing at the Easter Bowl, and I was just kind of looking to earn more revenue, to put it simply, off of my 9 days at the Easter Bowl. And I was looking for smaller string companies that would say, I don't want to say use me as an account, but kind of sponsor me in a way in return for getting their name in the door and hopefully some sets of strings sold. And you guys can see where I'm going with this. And that grew into an incredible relationship where now I work with them to develop their rackets and string. I am traveling to run the stringing room at Kalamazoo at the Nationals every year. And that has led to infinitely more opportunities and growth. I come to a facility and say, hi, you'd like to hire me. Here's why. Because the company I work with will sponsor Are Your Pros. They go, wow, all our pros are getting sponsored by the same company. That's pretty impressive. He didn't even ask. He didn't have to sign a contract. He just knows this because this is a brand that believes in me, because I have information that they'd like and I have a skill set that helps them. Greg, were you going to say something? I saw you jump in here.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. I just want to throw some questions at you if I can. And then you
Yes,
can
please.
elaborate more. But one of them is, what types of strings do you encourage to your players? You might have just answered that a little bit, but and then what's your opinion on how often players should restring their rackets?
Yes. So a couple of quick things, and I want to throw one in here before I forget. If you're on Facebook, I run the largest social media group for stringers and racket customizers. It's called Unstrung Heroes. We have about 4,000 members from around the world. And the whole point of the discussion that I'm having with you is kind of the subtext of this Facebook group. So if you want to see more posts, discuss it, jump on there. We love having new people come up with ideas. Type of string. Nowadays, the most important type of string job you can give your players, if possible, is polyester. Nothing produces spin like polyester. Nothing will benefit your player's style of play like polyester. And the two critical pieces in that equation are the tension you choose and the gauge you choose. And I just gave a great seminar to the USPTA Southwest and my homie Jack Michalko, and we talked about how the number one question that no one asks about your string job is what gauge or thickness are your strings. There is an insane difference between a 16 gauge polyester and a 20 gauge polyester that, once again, Solinco specializes in. Thinner strings produce more spin. Thicker strings don't break as often. So if you ask your students, you break a lot of strings? And they go, no way. They could be going thinner. They could be hitting more spin. It could be softer on their arm. Maybe they could use a stiffer material like polyester and enhance their spin even more. You could tell I could go on for this for days. So the ultimate string job I start almost everybody off with, again, almost everybody, if they can handle it, super thin polyester, Solinco 19 gauge Hyper G in the mains, 20 gauge in the crosses, and stringing it loose. I string my rackets 32 pounds now. I let my players hit with it all the time. I don't tell them what tension it is. They go, this feels great. I've never hit so hard in my life. I'll tell them it's 32 pounds. They go, oh my God, I can't even believe it. Because the number throws people off, and we kind of need to update people that tension ranges have changed. How often you should restring your racket. You should be breaking strings a couple times a year at the least. So a huge mistake I see stringers and shops do is they give every adult player 16 gauge multi-filament. They're not big string breakers, so it's not going to break very often. So you're now stringing yourself out of a living But it also, that sort of generic 16 gauge synthetic gut string job is kind of the minivan of the stringing world, Greg, where you're not winning any races, you don't look cool, but it'll get you to and from. And I think when it comes to players' equipment, especially players like adults that I'm so passionate about, we need to be giving them every advantage. I know I had a player the other day, I said, you know, listen, if John Isner's stringing at 38 pounds and he's the greatest server ever, why would he string at 38? Because he needs the racket to do more work for him. Who needs their racket to do more work for them than my adult 3.0s? So why would I string their racket at 65? Makes no sense. So I'm not saying I'm right about everything. I'm saying that's the way I do things. I love to hear other opinions, but in my experience, most, maybe I'll say it this way, a final stat, the average string tension for ATP men in the top 100 is lower than the average string tension at your tennis club. That tells you everything you need to know about how well informed the players at your club are and the coaches at your club are, and maybe the stringer at your club is. I know that sounds a bit harsh. I want to just, are there any other questions? Greg, you got any that jump out at you?
Yeah,
Because I
well,
could go
one
for
was
days.
just, there's just one about customization. It just says you can talk forever on grip customization, any suggestions, ideas, recommendations, kind of alluding to like how Nadal will play with a 4 1/4 grip. Is it smaller grip, larger grips, flared butt caps, all the
Yep.
different things you might see?
Great question. It's like the way you dress. It's personal preference and it's style. You talked to, I was very honored one year at Indian Wells, Richard Gasquet, who famously has like the end of a hockey stick at the end of his racket, came to me because I was stringing his rackets and had one of his grips was having some issues, and he let me retool his grip for him in a way that would last for the rest of the tournament. If you ask him, that's the best way to handle your racket, is to have that big old honking donut on the end of your handle. No one else uses that. I've never seen anybody else do it quite like that. Mike Russell has something much smaller than that, but similar. A lot of players enjoy that. That's personal preference. And the same way that Rafa likes a crazy small grip for a fully grown adult man, he holds it more in his fingers so he can whip it around more. I love classic rackets. If you look at any of my Wilson Pro Staff 85s that I have, the old Sampras stick, they're all 4 1/2 or 4 5/8 grips. It's hard to find one of those nowadays in a 4 1/4. Why? Because back in the day when everyone served and volleyed, they thought a bigger grip gave you more control of the racket. Nowadays, Rafa wins everything and he has a super small grip with 2 overgrips. We're copying him. So I would say that's personal preference. My one piece of advice on grips is that if you're a pro shop or if you're a coach who stocks rackets, it's easy to make grips one size bigger. So if I were you and you were stocking rackets, I'd carry a lot of 1/4s and 3/8 and no halves, because not a lot of people buy halves. You could always make your 1/4s into 3/8. You could always make your 3/8 into a half, but don't bother with big grip sizes. I know a lot of companies don't even make 4 5/8 anymore. I string, hold on, I'm seeing one right here. I string 19 gauge Hyper G and 18 gauge Torbite Soft on 75% of my members whose age is over 65. Yeah, I love it. John Ramsey, excellent, excellent industry professional when it comes to stringing. Greg, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just one other thing I would ask is there somewhere if they want more information on how to get more knowledgeable in this? You gave your Facebook page. Is there somewhere where you would say, boy, you want to get better instantly, go to this site? This is a good place to find a lot of information.
Greg, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a book called Technical Tennis. It's written by Rod Cross and Crawford Lindsay. These are 2 physicists that would read the back of a set of string, like we've all seen, that says 9 for control and 7 for spin, and laugh. They'd say, what unit of measurement is that? And who's doing this testing? And is there a non-biased organization that's doing all this testing? There are some online that try to do that, but Technical Tennis, the book, to me, really was the jumping off point for my career, where I started questioning everything and going, oh, that's interesting. The physics says, for instance, that textured strings do not impart more spin to the ball. They make your players think about parting more spin to the ball, and so therefore they do. And so what that says is that you don't need to be upselling them on everything being textured. Those are things that once I started to think like that, I'm like, okay, I start to see the signal amongst all the noise a little bit better. I would also say you can please reach out to me if you want to continue this discussion. I love talking about this stuff. You can find me at my website, customracketconcepts.com. I want to leave you guys with one parting thought here, if that's okay from you, Greg.
Yes.
So this is like my one nugget of wisdom that if you could take one thing away, this is a good jumping off point for strings and stringing. There are 7 factors that affect string bed stiffness. It's incredibly helpful if you know them and you memorize them, because it will make you, again, think about all the things going into your player's equipment and their string bed, and how you can manipulate them. And those 7 factors are, there's 3 that have to deal with the string. So there's the string type, meaning the polyester, multi-filament, natural gut, synthetic gut, something like that. The tension it's strung at. And again, the one I said that everyone overlooks, the gauge, huge. The thickness is big. Those are the 3 that have to deal with the string. The next 2 have to deal with the racket, which is the string pattern. So those Wilson Burns that were 16 by 15 is a much softer string bed than a Blade 1820. And then the final 3 have to deal with, the final 2 have to deal with the stringing. So that's the stringer technique. I find that's often a thing. Somebody goes, this one's tighter than the last one I got done at that different place. Different machine, different stringer technique. Those two things contribute to string bed stiffness. So if I want everybody to play with polyester because it enhances the spin on the ball more than anything else, what of those 7 factors can I manipulate to make that happen? Stiff string, because polyester is a stiff material. We go thin gauge, we go low tension. Polyester at 35 pounds might feel like synthetic gut at 50 pounds, but synthetic gut will not perform the way polyester does. And I promise you, because I always offer people, I'll do it the way you like it for free if you don't like it. People will come back and go, I have never hit the ball like that. And then they go, Matt's the first person in all these years to tell me to do this. And then they go, I'm never going to anyone else ever again. And your career grows from there.
Matt, I really appreciate your time. You are so knowledgeable, and for sharing with all of us and giving back to the game. We really appreciate it. I put your email also on the chat room so people have
Wonderful.
it. And hopefully they'll reach out with you with more questions. But thank you very, very much. And can't tell you how much we appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes with our last speaker, Brian Park. Thank you, guys.